Hello, everyone. This is Dwayne Duncan coming today. I hope that you're doing well and having a blessed day. I'm coming today with another video on how to study the Bible and just some basic practical tips that you can use to help you study. I posted a couple of videos. You can find it on my YouTube page as well as my Facebook page on just some tips on how to study the Bible. As I stated before, sometimes get a lot of calls or different things where people are reaching out and just saying, hey, I really want to study the Bible. It's frustrating or it's just a little overwhelming. What are some ways I can approach that? And so that's what these videos are for. This last one that I'm posting is about audience relevance and the importance of understanding that when we approach the scripture. And so there's a saying that's always stated, and I like to state it right now, and that is that the Bible is not written to us, but is written for us. It's very important that we understand that. The Bible was not written to us, but it is written for us. That means that there is an actual audience that each book is a writer is talking to. There's actual situations that's going on. There's an environment. There's a cultural things that we must take into consideration. But we must understand, even though it's not written to us, what was written is still for us. And that the principles of the scriptures we're looking for, we want to apply those spiritual truths. And so, for example, the law of gravity is a principle. What must go up must go down. That's going to be here throughout all generations, whether before your time and after your time. That principle does not change. Well, just like that's a true principle, that's what we want to do when we approach the scripture. Even though the scripture wasn't written to us and there's an audience that's still being spoken to, God has principles in that text that we need to get out that still applies as universal truth, both spiritual, supernatural laws. And so we want to make sure that we understand that principle. But in order for us to get to the true principle, we must understand the context, or we'll get conned out of the text. We need to know who they're talking to, what's the conversation, what's going on. We don't want to just hop in a book and make assumptions or read into the text. But we want to make sure we pull out of the text what the writer was originally saying. And so we want to get as close as we can to it. We're not going to be perfect, but we want to be as close as we can to it. And so it's very important, because what happens often is when we don't do that, we have misunderstandings. And understanding, you have this word understanding, it means under, and then you have stand, which means rule. It means to become under a measure of rule. Well, misunderstanding is now you're not properly under the right measure of rule. And so that leads to misapplication and frustrations and like, where's God? And it's not that God is not doing anything, or the scriptures are not true, is that we might be under the wrong measure of rule. So we want to pray for understanding so that we can have wisdom, which is applying the knowledge that we get so that we can properly apply it in our lives. And so when we approach the scriptures, a couple tips that you can have when you're reading. Number one is, who is the author? That matters, because we want to understand God. Just like preachers, when we speak today, God uses us, but it doesn't negate our history. It does not negate our ethnicity. It does not negate our upbringing. Well, just like the writers, we have to understand that the language they're going to use, their understanding, their thought process, God is using that and speaking through them. And so we need to understand that who is the author. Number two is we need to understand, who are they talking to? Who are they talking to? Okay, we need to know that. We need to know what is going on in the text. What is happening? What is happening? When does happen? This matters, because marriages, or how they did kingdoms, or different things, or governments, whatever it may be, or time periods, there's different things that are happening during the time. So we need to know when this happened. We need to know, why is this book even being written? Why did the author write it? We need to understand that, right? So who, what, when, where matters as well, because geographical locations and what they're talking about is going to impact that as well. Why, and then we need to understand that. So those W's, we kind of learn this in English, but we sometimes don't apply that in the Bible. But we need to do that when we're approaching the scripture. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so the how piece is, again, how they wrote it, and or maybe have brought it about. But the W's is what matter the most. And so, for example, I'm just throwing these out for food for thought. Some people, when they read Genesis, they think the author was writing and explain every piece of how God created everything, in the sense of every detail of it, and he's explaining everything. So then it's like, if I don't see it in there, did that happen? That's not what the reason why he wrote the book. That's not the reason for it. I won't get into all of that tonight. I'm just wanting to challenge our thinking, right? And so it's deeper. Yes, he talks about creation, but it's deeper than that. You have to ask ourselves, why is this book being written, right? And another example, Matthew, the book of Matthew, the Gospels. I always like to use these as examples. They all bring up examples of Jesus, but they're not talking about everything the same way. The Gospel of Matthew is talking to a Jewish audience. We know that right off the beginning, because in the beginning, he lists the whole family tree to prove that Jesus is the King of Israel, that he's coming through the Israel line, not only the King of Israel, but the King of creation. Matthew is writing to a Jewish audience, and he's trying to prove that Jesus is King. Well, that matters, because that's why you see all throughout his book, he keeps saying, and the scripture said, which means this is an audience that would have known what he was talking about. So he's not talking to Gentiles, he's talking to a Jewish audience. But it matters because the things that he's using and the argument he's making is Jesus is the king. That's why he's writing that. So he's proved everything he's using, all the examples he's using is to prove that. Mark, he's proven that Jesus is a servant, that he came to serve. Luke is proving that Jesus was 100% human. And then we look at John. John is trying to prove that Jesus is God. And so all the Gospels writers, they use some similar examples and different details, but they're writing with a purpose. Matthew is writing for that reason. Mark is writing for that reason. Luke is writing for that reason. John is writing for that reason. So we need to ask ourselves those questions, or we'll miss what they're trying to communicate. And when we truly understand that, and that there is an audience and there is relevance, like this, these books were not written to us in 2026, but the principles still apply today. We need to understand that audience relevance matters. We need to understand the covenants that they were under, because from Genesis all the way up to the cross, that's the old covenant. And then you get to the cross, because covenants are done with the blood being shed. Then you start to see the new covenant. Well, that's why you start to see different changes going on. So when you look at Paul's letters, he's talking about a lot of arguments that's happening, and they're trying to debate on how to transition now that Jesus has come. Now they don't have to do sacrifices no more. Now they don't have to do all these things that they had to do for 4,000 or 5,000 years. And so now there's these conversations, but we're hopping into that conversation. And so the danger of it is we open in my Bible and say, oh, they're writing this to me, when I want to find the principle that's written for me. I want to say that one more time. I don't want to open my Bible and say, oh, they're talking to me. I want to open it and say, Lord, what is the principles that you want me to get out for me? And when we do that, we'll be under understanding, with wisdom being applied, and not misunderstanding under the wrong measure of rule. Crown our heads with wisdom, so that we may walk in your truth. And truly your word will be a light for our path, a lamp unto our feet. And so we thank God for that tonight. I pray that blesses you and helps give you an understanding. Ask yourselves those questions when you're studying. Who, what, when, where, and why. And you can even add how sometimes, depending on the context. I pray this helps you. God bless.